Kitty Hart-Moxon was 15 years old when she arrived at Birkenau. She witnessed the entire process of extermination.
Mine was the very first hut overlooking the gas chamber and crematorium 4. But you could see what was going on. And that's when it was so incredible to actually watch hundreds and thousands of people coming in front of me, because separated by a electrified fence and not being able to communicate, because it was forbidden to communicate with these people.
The arrival procedure of one transport of Hungarian deportees was photographed by an SS guard.
When we were outside, we were first separated, men and women. And this was the last time I saw my father. And then I was separated from my mother, who had to be dragged out already. She didn't know where she was. She had collapsed mentally and physically. And she was straight away taken to the chimney, which was belching out smoke, and we had this terrible stench on arrival, which we didn't know at that time, but we found out later it was burning bodies. So I thought at least she didn't have to go through the whole thing, what happened afterwards, because she couldn't have taken it. I mean, she obviously was not strong enough to take it.
Many of them were in a very, very bad state. Others were just totally bewildered, I would say. But nobody in their own imagination would have imagined they were going straight to die.
Deliberate deception and secrecy was key to the SS killing machine. The Nazis couldn't afford panic or the threat of an uprising amongst the new arrivals. So beautifully landscaped gardens were planted to reassure the prisoners as they were led from the trains to the gas chambers. The crematoria themselves were hidden from the inmates within a wall of birch trees.
Many of them were sitting in the woods. You know, there were lots of woods there. They were just sitting around waiting to go into the gas chambers because they had no idea. People didn't know. They thought they were told by loudspeakers they were going to have showers. So it lulled them into some false of security, of course. And I actually saw them being led into the gas chamber, groups of people. You actually saw the men pouring the gas in. There was a skylight at the top of the gas chamber, and there was always a man, sometimes in green uniform, sometimes they wore kind of white things over, sort of disinfecting gear, and he'd walk up the ladder and empty a tin of these gas crystals into the skylight. And a few minutes after that, you could hear people actually dying, screaming, because the sounds were muffled. And that would last anything up to 20 minutes. And then the next thing you'd see was fire and smoke come out of the chimney. And then you saw the men who worked inside the crematoria taking out the ash and dumping it at the back of the crematoria. Now that I saw day in, day out for 8 months.
The increase in arrivals demanded the extension of a special section known as Canada. It was a clearing camp for the belongings of the deportees, positioned directly between the 4 crematoria. After selection on the ramp, all the luggage, clothes and other possessions were collected by prisoners and brought to Canada for sorting.
There were 30 wooden sheds. In those sheds were most of the belongings of the people, all jumbled up, food, prams, toys, everything. You see, I was sorting men's jackets for 8 months. Nothing but men's jackets I had to sort. You had to do a certain quota, and if you didn't, because you got punished. There's one hut that has shoes piled up to the roof of the hut, just shoes jumbled up. People were actually told when they were taken to the gas chamber to tie their shoes together so that they can find them again. But of course that wasn't true. That was so that they could be found and shipped to Germany, because all the stuff was eventually shipped to Germany.
The summer of 1944 was a vital period in the Allied war effort. The Normandy invasion and the battle for France. The V-bomb attacks on Britain. And the Americans' intense fighting against the Japanese in the Pacific. All competed for Allied resources and priority. In the midst of this turmoil, both the British and American governments received formal diplomatic requests to act against the killing at Auschwitz. On the 6th of July, Churchill was notified of a petition by the Jewish Agency. It had received reports that 400,000 Hungarian Jews had already been deported to Auschwitz. Now it was appealing to Churchill's government in London and to the US War Department in Washington to do something to stop the killing. It requested that the Allies bomb the death camp and the railway lines leading to it. Having gathered enough information on the operation of Auschwitz to classify it as an extermination camp, would the Allies now consider it possible to mount a bombing raid to destroy it? By July 1944, the Allies had more detailed information than ever before about the atrocities at Auschwitz death camp. The detailed accounts by escapees of the extermination process and intelligence on the ongoing deportations prompted calls for action from several Jewish organizations. Finally, in London and Washington, the debate over Auschwitz began. At the same time, aerial reconnaissance interpreters were learning more and more about the IG Farben factory at Monowitz. Still under construction, it was one of Germany's largest synthetic oil refineries. On the 18th of July, the plant was officially designated a target for Allied bombing. But again, the interpreters failed to realize that Monowitz was part of the Auschwitz slave labor system, just 7 kilometers from the main extermination center of Birkenau. Tens of thousands of prisoners sent here to build the vast IG Farben plant at Monowitz were literally worked to death.
But the work was carrying cement bags from a train to a building, where they were building more buildings, their factories. But we were not allowed to walk with this bag. We had to run, day in, day out, 25 kilos, which is tremendously heavy.
The work was supervised by capos, prisoners put in charge of other prisoners.
Capos were watching you, and the capos are ex-criminals. Rapists, murderers, men with bad tempers, who taken out of the prisons by the Nazis, taken to the camps to do the dirty work for the Nazis. So you can expect anything of those men.
They were murderers, they were really heavy criminals, and they had the power of life or death over us. They walked around with this stick. And when we didn't run fast enough with our cement bag on the back, we got hit by capos.
It was a bad life. a frightened, bad life. And that's why a lot of them didn't want, they couldn't no more, they didn't want to, they gave up. They didn't see nothing nice, what is still in store. I did, my wife and child, and I wanted to be back. But a lot of them didn't, and they died because they were weak. We became weak. And I remember the day, the selection, big barrack full of men, undress, the 2 tables in the front, on each table an SS, and we got to move up towards the 2 tables. Now, behind me is Eddie Harmel, a man, a professional footballer from Ajax, Amsterdam. He is behind me and he says, I got an abscess in my mouth and I don't know what's going to happen.
We had to line up completely naked and we had to walk in front of them, and we all had to drive to be straight, chest out, and show them how wonderful you can walk in front of them and smile at them to show I'm all right, you know, don't select me, because we knew when you're getting selected, you will go, you don't live anymore.
The queue moves up. I'm near the 2 tables. I walk between the 2 tables, and the SS directs me to the right. And as I walk away, I look behind me, thinking Eddie Harmel will come behind me. He's directed to the left, and I never saw Eddie Harmel again. He was a guest because he had an abscess in his mouth.
So many were selected and never seen again. Even if one of the girls had a full bust, they were suspecting that she's pregnant or something, and never seen again.
The killings in the summer of 1944 were on such a scale that the crematoria could not cope. This aerial reconnaissance photograph, taken on the 25th of August, shows a large plume of smoke in the area behind Crematorium 5. To increase the extermination potential of Birkenau, some of the bodies from the gas chambers were burnt in open pits.
Corpses were stacked up at the back of the crematoria. We saw people lined up being actually shot and heard the shots, and saw people being thrown into the pits and burnt alive, some people.